I'll put this out there. I think there's a better chance that Nick Rallis is a head coach this time next year than Drew Petzing is fired. I'll put that out there. The Austin Ford hired one Jonathan Gannon, and that's spotlights our coaching highlight for the today. Bo Brack here in a PHNX Cardinals offseason discussion with the head ball coach coming into his third year as the head coach of this franchise. And he's got his two coordinators, Bo Brack, saddled up for the third consecutive year, which is not something we've had too much. There's been turnover in prior coaching staffs. There's been promotions if you're Todd Bowles, circa 2014. So a lot of continuity on this staff.
Yeah, I think it's a great mix of continuity and new faces, right? Yeah. Like you've got some, I don't know if you could call them upgrades, but they tried to go a different direction in a couple different departments, and we'll get kind of the new additions to this coaching staff along with the guys who exited this organization, one key member of the coaching staff that left. But I think that mix would serve them well. It doesn't, I don't think this is a coaching staff that ever would get complacent, but do you need new messaging there in certain different areas? You don't need wholesale changes. I think there's a lot of confidence in this. And then you look at the top coordinators under Jonathan Gannon, you've got two guys that are trending in different directions. And I think that when you see the numbers, it could be surprising to the outsider because I think Drew Petzing, especially year over year, you see the improvement offensively, but also you have to all take into consideration what he's been kind of benefited from having as far as talent on that side of the football. So, taking a look at the coaching staff, firing up, going into year three with, we'll start with the top guy, Jonathan Gannon. I think I think the fan base collectively, the consensus, there's a ton of confidence in JG. And I think that obviously is within the organizational walls in Tempe and in Glendale. I think Bidwell loves Jonathan Gannon. You're a big kind of pounding the table that this could be a season that translates into an extension for JG. And but as far as the culture changer that he's been, as far as what he's got, a more disciplined and more fun product to watch. Now I think in year three, let's see what Jonathan Gannon does with some expectations. And I think that's going to be a little bit of a different twist to what we've seen in the first two seasons.
I think Cardinal fans universally have support and faith in their head coach, given the fact that where this franchise was, given the fact that there's been questionable ownership moves over the last half decade plus. For him to be able to come in here and steady the waters, I think speaks to the kind of person and professional he is. And then I think you just got to look nationally. It's like there are people who don't love Kyler Murray. There are people who don't love Marvin Harrison Jr., that don't love the Cardinals defense. It's almost universal that people think Jonathan Gannon is a big-time head coach, that the reason why the Cardinals are going to be competitive, if they're competitive this year, is the JG on the sideline. That Jonathan Gannon, I just heard Colin Cowherd say the other day, it's like Cardinals are going to be good because they're going to win games they're not supposed to because of their head coach. Like he dismissed that Eagles narrative immediately. I think with his rookie year with the Cardinals winning games without Kyler Murray, winning games against the Dallas Cowboys, right? I think convincingly beating Pittsburgh on the road, beating Philadelphia, like with no business doing that, right? And when you're having those kind of performances and then you level up the next year, disappointing finish. But again, like how many games were the Cardinals just not competitive in? Well, Green Bay, better roster postseason team. Washington almost went to the Super Bowl, right? There were a couple instances, but for the most part, like Lions loaded squad, shut out in the second half by Gannon's defense, right? Winning in Minnesota should have beat the Vikings. There were a ton of instances like that where they played above their talent level. And that's the best thing you can say about Jonathan Gannon. I said this time and time again. I don't know his ceiling as a head coach. I want it to be hoisting the Lombardi trophy. But I do feel like his floor is very Mike Vrabel-esque, where as long as you've got competent quarterback play, your floor is like 7-8 wins. And your ceiling is like, hey, this guy gets us to the playoffs. We could be a 1 seed. They're super competitive. Oh, they won 11 games in an off year. Like, I think that's the kind of coach he is. And I think this is the year you really start to reap the benefits, Bo, as you mentioned, of an upgraded roster.
Yeah, a true test, right? I mean, I know that we learned a lot about Gannon, his staff, throughout 2 years where they were working on the roster and trying to build things up. But like even in non-wins, especially year one, we you got a glimpse, and I think nationally people all got the idea like, hey, we thought this was going to be a team in the Arizona Cardinals that the opposition was just going to show up and they were just going to be handed a win. And that was the farthest thing from it. Like for them, they showed up and they scratched, they clawed, and they gave competitive games week in and week out, despite having the worst roster in the league in 2023 when Kyler Murray was out for the first 10 weeks. And Jonathan Gannon was the one that was able to kind of put the team in a position to do that. I agree with all that. I mean, now you start to look at, okay, what are the expectations? What's the outlook for his coordinators? Because like you've got one where I think the fan base just can't wait to see what's going to happen with Nick Rallis, where you've got a ton of confidence in the defense to kind of become a suffocating part of the football with their improved personnel under Rallis. And then you've got like the skepticism on the offensive sides, like, hey, running this back and kind of pushing all your chips into the middle of the table, betting on Drew Petzing. I'm a little nervous about that. Can this chemistry really, translate to things opening up offensively and them taking a big step? Like those are two very different outlooks for both sides, for the two sides of the football for under Gannon.
Yeah. To me, it's you want to talk about Drew Petzing. Jonathan Gannon doesn't want to be the head coach that recycles coordinators, that just goes one year after another. Let's get a new person in here just for the sake of it. Like maybe it's to a fault. We'll find out this year. He believes in Drew Petzing. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been retained. They would have pivoted off of Drew Petzing. They would have gotten a new coordinator, but he believes it's what's best for Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. and everybody. Now they're going to have to produce this year. And again, like, are we overly critical of the offense? I don't think so, but I do think the numbers are better than like even we make them out to be. Like, weren't they like 12th in total offense last year? Like they were a respectable offense, but I feel like it didn't come at the right time for them, right? Like when you needed a touchdown, they couldn't deliver, but then they'd have a crooked number against the Rams, or they'd have a crooked number against the Niners that didn't mean much in the finale. And it boosted some of those totals. We know Drew Petzing can scheme up a run game maybe as good as anybody. Like I will give him credit. Like it's Shanahan-esque that he's able to conjure up 4 yards in a cloud of dust, where Amara DiMercado's averaging like 8 yards per carry. But this is the comparison or the example I've continually used on it. It's like we know Drew could come in here 2 years ago and take a roster that was not ready to compete and say, I'm going to make this watchable with Josh Dobbs. I'm going to make it respectable. Offensive line's going to get better, and Yelda Froholt and Paris Johnson and the tight ends, and Trey's going to emerge. And he leveled up the Cardinals offense 2 years ago. He absolutely did. Now he has to level up again. And we have to make sure that Drew Petzing's ceiling is not what we've seen thus far. And Gannon and company are banking that it's not, that Drew has another level to go to. And again, they're giving him every opportunity to hit that this year.
Yeah, let's take a look at those numbers that Johnny was talking about here. Offensively, if you're joining with us, if you're watching, you can see them here on the screen. But in 2023, the team averaged just over 20 points per game, 20.5. That was tied for 21st, where in last season they were at 23.5, which was 12th in the league. Just kind of knocking on the door. It's maybe a top 10 scoring team. But yeah, was that swayed by a couple big performances against the Jets and the Rams in week 2 and the Bears and the 47 in the finale? Certainly, like those made the numbers look a lot better. And also, I think you have to consider that they were way better offensively in the first half of games than they were in the second half of games. Remember that they came out of the gates hot to start the season. It felt like each and every game, like they were scoring on every opening drive. And then they went stagnant, and they were far too quiet between like the middle of the second quarter into the third quarter, and they just couldn't finish the job. Total yards, you see them year over year up significantly. They were 24th in the league in 23. Top 10, Johnny, last year, 371. But I think this is where people are going to kind of start to make some noise about the passing attack. 23rd in passing yards, 214. It's up, of course, from the debacle that was, the first year. You got Josh Dobbs in there, Clayton Tune one game before Kyler Murray came back, 29th in the league. But, you see him on 3rd and long. They weren't great. Really didn't take any shots. They were a little risk adverse in the passing game and then dominant. back-to-back seasons, 7th place finishing in rushing yards. And you look at the third down numbers improve there, but improvements across the board. You can't deny the growth. But as you said, people look at this personnel, Kyler Murray, nearly $50 million quarterback, 4th overall pick, stout run game, good offensive line, one of the best tight ends in the league. They expect a little bit higher of a performance than the Arizona Cardinals produced in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, the proof is in the pudding with Drew on the left-hand side, is that you had Kyler Murray for the entirety of 2024, and you went up 6 spots passing the football. It's just not enough, right? And those numbers were juiced by K1 at the tail end, as you mentioned, of 2023. But then, like, rushing, very consistent, right? Like, for the Cardinals to get where they needed to be last year, like, that passing yards per game needed to be top 20. And we all believed it. I sat here on the show last summer and said, Bo, like, if Kyler Murray plays every game, like, he's going to break records. He's going to have a monster year statistically because of how comfortable he looked in the offense. Yeah. Man, think about the game he had at Philadelphia 2 years ago. Three passing touchdowns, they get rushing touchdowns. Like, here we go. Mm-hmm. We're locked in. He looked good in the finale against the Seattle Seahawks, and they never got going with an offense where it was like humming and you could count on it for 4 quarters, right? They'd queue up. Drew could queue up a great opening drive. And then from there, it's like, okay, they disappeared for a couple quarters. That's the next step. But let's talk about the defensive coordinator in Nick Rallis for a second, because we've outlined this before. Noah, man, can we see that graphic one more time? Like, points allowed per game, you cut it in half, right? With almost the same players. Like, I know there were tweaks here and there, but like, who is the major upgrade that they had defensively last year? Like, Mack Wilson Sr., with all due respect, no Bilal Nichols or Justin Jones or Bijo Jalari. I mean, he's like the same guys.
Right.
He cut it in half. That's why we're all bullish. Like, 15th could easily go to like 6th, 7th in the NFL this year with Josh Sweat, who we're going to talk about later, and Calais and Dalvin Tomlinson and Will Johnson. I think the big one there is column 4 is the takeaways. You know, we preach about sacks. They're important. Pressures are important. The Cardinals, though, if they want to be a big-time contender this year defensively, like, that number has to be an aggressive number that we saw from, like, Minnesota last year that spearheaded their Kickstarter defense. Like, you can't be having less than 20 takeaways and be a playoff-level defense. And I think the game records that they brought in this offseason, we haven't even talked about Walter Nolan today, like, that they're going to allow them opportunities to take the football away at all 3 levels of their defense.
Yeah, if it's 17 interceptions, that's fine. But you gotta conjure up more opportunities to get your hands on the football. We talked to Rabbit Taylor Demerson, I think, the first day you were out, and you can tell that there's an emphasis from the coaching staff that they want to get their hands on more footballs this year. I think there's a heavy belief that the improved defensive front 7 with the addition of Josh Sweat and Walter Nolan and Calais Campbell and Dalvin Tomlinson are going to create opportunities to take the football away. Yes, Jacob, with Sub-Zero, Will Johnson, and other draft investments in that secondary, along with Budda Baker, to get that football in their hands. And yeah, there's an immense amount of confidence because it's not just Nick Rallis. We know it's Nick Rallis, it's Jonathan Gannon. That's the brain trust that have shown already a ton of success at the NFL level. You just imagine with improved personnel that it's just going to continue to go and trend the right direction. So love to see it. Couple different ends of the spectrum as far as how coordinators are viewed, but still 2 guys in pretty decent positions. Like, if we put some kind of, we color coded it a little bit. Yeah. And we put, blue has you as in a very, strong position with the organization, while we've got kind of red as a vulnerable spot. And we put Petzing in kind of that vulnerable spot. I don't think anybody could deny it. Like, if it's the status quo offensively, I think that there's going to be enough disappointment to where they're going to seek change.
Yeah, I think because it would mirror, I don't want to dog on Kyler Murray my first show back, but it's like you would want to mirror an OC change with maybe a quarterback change, right? Like that would make sense to a lot of people. It's like, well, you start fresh, right? Or maybe bring in competition, because I don't know. Like, is there a reality in which Kyler Murray excels, but Drew Petzing gets fired? I don't know if that happens, right? But I think if we're sitting here and we're talking about Drew Petzing being replaced, then that probably means Kyler Murray's not playing as well as he needs to play. So the trickle down effect is significant with that. But I think on the flip side, and again, like you want this for him because you want him to have success, and his success is the Cardinal success. Yeah. Like, would it shock you if Nick Rallis is a head coach this time next year? Wouldn't shock me. Like, if the Cardinals have one of the best defenses in the NFL and Nick Rallis gets in front of people, then it could be game over. And I think what bodes well for Nick is that the league has started to kind of sway from offensive mastermind, young coaches, the guy out of Carolina that got hired. And obviously Cliff was an example of that, from Sean McVay. They've kind of steered away from that. They've gone back to leader of men, great coaches. Gannon fell into this category. I mean, Dan Quinn, the blueprint last year, that guy can just coach. Like, yes, Nick Rallis has a specialty defensively, but if he gets in front of people and it's like, look what I did 3 years, I rebuilt this Cardinal defense into maybe one of the league's best. I mean, it better come with a division title, and we can all stomach it a little bit sooner. But I'll put this out there. I think there's a better chance that Nick Rallis is a head coach this time next year than Drew Petzing is fired. I'll put that out there.